All right. Good morning. I'm slightly out of breath because I just sort of realized I just had this moment where I was like, "Oh my god, I'm almost done with this book." In my head, this had as many splits as I'm doing. I keep calling them the doggy books. The Provost Dogs trilogy on. It's the other one that's switching right now with Discworld, and it also doesn't have chapters, so it's split up by sections or whatnot. And in my head, this book had just as many sections, like 24 or 25 or whatever. And I was just looking at the splits. For the record, the splits for the Light Fantastic are now done. So if you would like to commission, I think the first four sections are taken, but the rest of it is done, and you can commission that. Anyway, I was looking at the page and was like, wait, I scrolled down and I thought there'd be a whole bunch more, and it's just section 14 is the only one. Oh my god. So, Christian, this is for you. Thank you. This is the 13th section of The Color of Magic. Oh, Lord. Have you tried the door? Yes, said Two Flower, and it isn't any less locked than it was the last time you asked. There's the window, though. A great way of escape, muttered Rincewind from his perch halfway up the wall. You said it looks out over the edge. Just step out, eh, and plunge through space and maybe freeze solid or hit some other world at incredible speeds, or plunge wildly into the burning heart of the sun. It's worth a try, said Two Flower. At this point, it kind of is worth a try. Want a seaweed biscuit? No! When are you coming down? Rincewind snarled. This was partly an embarrassment. Garhartra's spell had been a little used and hard to master. Adavar's personal gravitational upset, the practical result of which was that until it wore off, Rincewind's body was convinced that down lay at 90 degrees to that direction normally accepted, as of a downward persuasion, by the majority of the disk's inhabitants. He was in fact standing on the wall. Meanwhile, the flung bottle hung supportless in the air a few yards away. In its case, time had not actually been stopped, but had been slowed by several orders of magnitude, and its trajectory had so far occupied several hours and a couple of inches as far as Two Flower and Rincewind were concerned. The glass gleamed in the moonlight. Rincewind sighed and tried to make himself comfortable on the wall. Why don't you ever worry? He demanded petulantly. Here we are, going to be sacrificed to some god or other in the morning, and you just sit there eating barnacle canopies. Canapes. I've never said that word out loud. Canapé, right? I don't know if I've ever heard it. I don't think I've ever had them. Okay, I'll get back to my existential realization later. I expect something will turn up, said Two Flower. Oh, that is how his life's gone. I mean, it's not as if we know why we're going to be killed, the wizard went on. You'd like to, would you? Did you say that? asked Rincewind. Say what? You're hearing things, said the voice in Rincewind's head. He sat bolt sideways. Who are you? He demanded. Two Flower gave him a worried look. I'm Two Flower, he said. Surely you remember? Rincewind put his head in his hands. It happened at last, he moaned. I'm going out of my mind. Good idea, said the voice. It's getting pretty crowded in here. What? The spell pinning Rincewind to the wall vanished with a pop. He fell forward and landed in a heap on the floor. Careful, you nearly squashed me. Rincewind struggled to his elbows and reached into the pocket of his robe. When he withdrew his hand, the green frog was sitting on it, its eyes oddly luminous in the half-light. You? Said Rincewind. Put me down on the floor and stand back. The frog blinked. The wizard did so and dragged a bewildered Two Flower out of the way. The room darkened. There was a windy, roaring sound. Streamers of green, purple, and octarine cloud appeared out of nowhere and began to spiral rapidly toward the recumbent amphibian, shedding small bolts of lightning as they whirled. Soon the frog was lost in a golden haze which began to elongate upward, filling the room with a warm yellow light. Within it was a darker, indistinct shape, which wavered and changed even as they watched, and all the time there was the high, brain-curdling whine of a huge magical field. And suddenly, as suddenly as it had appeared, the magical tornado vanished, and there, occupying the space where the frog had been, it's too early in the morning for this. Oh my god. What? And there, occupying the space where the frog had been, was a frog. What the fuck? Okay, I'm fine. Fantastic, said Rincewind. The frog gazed at him reproachfully. Really amazing, said Rincewind sourly. A frog magically transformed into a frog. Wondrous. Turn around, said a voice behind them. It was a soft, feminine voice, almost an inviting voice, the sort of voice you could have a few drinks with, but it was coming from a spot where there oughtn't to be a voice at all. They managed to turn without really moving, like a couple of statues revolving on plinths. There was a woman standing in the pre-dawn light. In point of actual fact, she Later, Rincewind and Twoflower couldn't quite agree on any single fact about her, except that she had appeared to be beautiful. Precisely what physical features made her beautiful they could not definitively state, and that she had green eyes. Not the pale green of ordinary eyes either. They were the green of fresh emeralds, as iridescent as a dragonfly. And one of the few genuinely magical facts that Rincewind knew was that no god or goddess, contrary and volatile as they might be in all other respects, could change the color or nature of their eyes. He began. She raised a hand. You know that if you say my name, I must depart, he hissed. Surely you recall that I am the one goddess who comes only when not invoked? Oh my god! What? What does she do? Why? Yes, I suppose I do, croaked the wizard. Try not to look at the eyes. You're the one they call the lady. Yes. Are you a goddess, then? Said Twoflower excitedly. I've always wanted to meet one. Rincewind tense, waiting for the explosion of rage. Instead, the lady merely smiled. Your friend, the wizard, should introduce us, she said. Rincewind coughed. He said, this is Twoflower, lady. He's a tourist. I've attended him on a number of occasions. And Twoflower, this is the lady. Just the lady, right? Nothing else? Don't try and give her any other name, okay? He went on desperately, his eyes darting meaningful glances that were totally lost on the little man. Rincewind shivered. He was not, of course, an atheist. On the disc, the gods dealt severely with atheists. That is the funniest thing in the universe. Oh my god. On the few occasions when he had some spare change, he always made a point of dropping a few coppers into a temple coffer somewhere on the principle that a man needed all the friends he could get. But usually he didn't bother the gods, and he hoped the gods wouldn't bother him. Well, about that, life was quite complicated enough. There were two gods, however, who were usually who were really terrifying. The rest of the gods were usually only sort of large-scale humans, fond of wine and war and whoring. But Fate and the lady were chilling. In the gods' quarter in Ankh-Morpork, Fate had a small, heavy, leaden temple where hollow-eyed and gaunt worshippers met on dark nights for their predestined and fairly pointless rites. There were no temples at all to the lady, although she was arguably the most powerful goddess in the entire history of creation. A few of the more daring members of the Gamblers' Guild had once experimented with a form of worship in the deepest cellars of guild headquarters and had all died of penury, murder, or just death within the week. They died of just death. Lord. She was the goddess who must not be named. Those who sought her never found her, yet she was known to come to the aid of those in greatest need. And then, again, sometimes she didn't. She was like that. She didn't like the clicking of rosaries, but was attracted to the sound of dice. No man knew what she looked like, although there were many times when a man who was gambling his life on the turn of the cards would pick up the hand he had been dealt and stare her full in the face. Of course, sometimes he didn't. Among all the gods, she was at one and the same time the most courted and the most cursed. We don't have gods where I come from, said Twoflower. You do, said the lady. Everyone has gods. You just don't think they're gods. Rincewind shook himself mentally. Look, he said, I don't want to sound impatient, but in a few minutes some people are going to come through that door and take us away and kill us. Yes, said the lady. I suppose you wouldn't tell us why, said Twoflower. Yes, said the lady, the Crulians intend to launch a bronze vessel over the edge of the disk. Their prime purpose is to learn the sex of a two-in-the-world turtle. Seems rather pointless, said Rincewind. Yeah, I was like, wait, why would you? No, consider. One day, Great Atuan may encounter another member of the species Chelis galactica somewhere in the vast night in which we move. Will they fight? Will they mate? A little imagination will show you that the sex of Great Atuan could be very important to us. At least so the Crulians say. That is an understatement. Wouldn't it be catastrophic? Because the disk would tip sight. Anyway, Rincewind tried not to think of world turtles mating. It wasn't completely easy. There's a Big Bang joke waiting in there. So, continued the goddess, they intend to launch the ship of space with 2 voyagers aboard. It will be the culmination of decades of research. It will also be very dangerous for the travelers. And so, in an attempt to reduce the risk, the arch-astronomer of Kroll has bargained with Fate to sacrifice 2 men at the moment of launch. Fate, in his turn, has agreed to smile on the spaceship. A neat barter, is it not? And where are the sacrifices, said Rincewind. Yes. I thought Fate didn't go in for that sort of bargaining. I thought Fate was implacable, said Rincewind. Normally, yes, but you two have been thorns in his side for some time. He specified that the sacrifices should be you. He allowed you to escape from the pirates. He allowed you to drift into the circumference. Fate can be one mean god at times. There was a pause. The frog sighed and wandered off under the table. But you can help us? Prompted Twoflower. You amuse me, said the lady. I have a sentimental streak. You'd know that if you were gamblers. So for a little while I rode in a frog's mine, and you kindly rescued me, for, as we all know, no one likes to see pathetic and helpless creatures swept to their death. Thank you, said Rincewind. She's talking about them. Oh my god. The whole mind of fate has been against you, said the lady, but all I can do is give you one chance, and just one small chance. The rest is up to you. She vanished. Gosh, said Two Flower after a while. That's the first time I've ever seen a goddess. The door swung open. Garhartra entered, holding a wand in front of him. Behind him were two guards, armed more conventionally with swords. Ah, he said conversationally. You are ready, I see. Ready, said a voice inside Rincewind's head. The bottle the wizard had flung some 8 hours earlier had been hanging in the air, imprisoned by magic in its own personal time field. But during all those hours, the original mana of the spell had been slowly leaking away until the total magical energy was no longer sufficient to hold it against the universe's own powerful normality field. And when that happened, reality snapped back in a matter of microseconds. The visible sign of this was that the bottle suddenly completed the last part of its parabola and burst against the side of Guestmaster's head, showering the guards with glass and jellyfish wine. Rincewind grabbed Two Flower's arm, kicked the nearest guard in the groin, and dragged the startled tourist into the corridor. Before the stunned Garhartra had sunk to the floor, his two guests were already pounding across distant flagstones. Rincewind skidded around a corner and found himself on a balcony that ran around the four sides of a courtyard. Below them, most of the floor of the yard was taken up by an ornamental pond in which a few terrapins sunbathed among the lily leaves. And ahead of Rincewind were a couple of very surprised wizards wearing the distinctive dark blue and black robes of trained hydrophobes. One of them, quicker on the uptake than his companion, raised a hand and began the first words of his spell. There was a short, sharp noise by Rincewind's side. Two Flower had spat. The hydrophobe screamed and dropped his hand as though it had been stung. Oh my god! Two Flower, you constantly amaze me. The other didn't have time to move before Rincewind was on him, fists swinging wildly. One stiff punch from the weight of terror behind it sent the man tumbling over the balcony rail and into the pond, which did a very strange thing. The water smacked aside, as though a large invisible balloon had been dropped onto it, and the hydrophobe hung screaming in his own revulsion field. A revulsion field. Two Flower watched him in amazement until Rincewind snatched at his shoulder and indicated a likely-looking passage. They hurried down it, leaving the remaining hydrophobe writhing on the floor and snatching at his damp hand. For a while there was some shouting behind them, but they scuttled along a cross corridor and another courtyard, and soon left the sounds of pursuit behind. Finally, Rincewind picked a safe-looking door, peered around it, found the room beyond to be unoccupied, dragged Two Flower inside, and slammed it behind him. Then he leaned against it, wheezing horribly. We're totally lost. In a palace on an island, we haven't a hope of leaving, he panted. And what's more, Hey, he finished, as the sight of the contents of the room filtered up his deranged optic nerves. Two Flower was already staring at the walls, because what was so odd about the room... What is this sentence? What? Because what was so odd about the room was it contained the whole universe. I can't even question that. Death sat in his garden, running a whetstone along the edge of his scythe. It was already so sharp that any passing breeze that blew across it was sliced smoothly into two puzzled zephyrs, although breezes were rare indeed in Death's silent garden. It lay on a sheltered plateau overlooking the Discworld's complex dimensions, and behind it loomed the cold, still, immensely high and brooding mountains of eternity. Swish went the stone. Death hummed a dirge and tapped one bony foot on the frosty flagstones. Someone approached through the dim orchard where the night apples grew. Night apples? And there came the sickly sweet smell of crushed lilies. Death looked up angrily and found himself staring into eyes that were black as the inside of a cat and full of distant stars that had no counterpart among the familiar constellations of the real-time universe. Death and Fate looked at each other. Death grinned. He had no alternative, of course, being made of implacable bone. The whetstone sang rhythmically along the blade as he continued his task. I have a task for you, said Fate. His words drifted across Death's scythe and split tidily into two ribbons of consonants and vowels. I have enough tasks this day, said Death in a voice as heavy as neutronium. The white plague abides even now in Pseudopolis, and I am bound there to rescue many of its citizens from his grasp. Such a one has not been seen these 100 years. I am expected to stalk the streets, as is my duty. Oh boy. Okay, I'm going to make another video and then keep reading.